Hello, hello. Welcome back to Think Shank, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning back in. This is where we discuss questions about sports that aren't raised nor explored enough, as far as we can tell. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkShank. You can email us at thethinkshank@gmail.com. I'm Skyler Reinhardt, your personal NBA junkie, philosopher, tour guide, or whatever else you'd like. Plot twist, we're still doing it for clout, so let us know. Intro song, content, takes, thoughts, reflections, all of that. You can find me personally on Twitter at Reinhardt Skyler, ReinHardt, Skyler, Skyler, no A's. Instagram at Skyler Sam, Sam, Reinhardt, no spaces. Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning back in. I know it's been a bonkers last 5 days. It is Friday, February 2nd at around 8 o'clock on a Friday. It turns out when you have a day job and you start a new gig for that, and there is a trade deadline in 6 days now, there's just a lot going on, and you're just receiving updates, and you're also just working and, you know, tearing ideas down and tearing takes down and building them back up and blah, blah, blah. So it's a very exciting time, though. This is like peak TMZ drama soap opera stuff. This is where the league is just, you know, everybody turns on each other, like Game of Thrones style. I love it. We'll see who gets the banhammer from Braun in LA and which teams make things work and whatever. So it is a very packed episode. Again, so much going on. So how are we going to dive into it today? Well, I want to start off by taking a deep dive into one of the side stories beyond the trade. And of course, that is the new 65-game playing threshold for regular season awards and honors. I'm going to start off by taking a look historically at those awards, how they work, what it actually takes to be considered or to win. Next, I want to analyze the actual new rule, reactions, arguments we've heard for and against it, qualify them, where do we conclude. Next, which I don't really hear a lot of people doing, I'd love to walk you guys through my proposal to improve it. So, full disclosure, I'm not an expert, but I at least have ideas, and, you know, like I'm saying, when I can put brain cells to use, trying to think about how we can make it better, not just pointing fingers and saying it's stupid. So I'm really excited for that. It's not a full-on proposal. I'd say more of a proposal prototype is the name I went with here. But, you know, at the minimum, I just think it's helpful to just throw ideas into the void and jumpstart whatever. So I'm going to do that. And then I want to discuss Embiid, his specific situation and series of events. So, you know, moving from the theoretical and conceptual into the actual reality and what we saw there, and my thoughts. And then lastly, I want to touch on the trade ideas, the trade deadline, the big thing that may or may not make or break the entire season for, I don't know, about like 10 different teams. We'll see. So that is the plan, overall look ahead. One more time, I just want to say thank you to all you freaks for tuning back in. Very busy time, and I'm really excited to get to share my thoughts with you. So coming up, we have the historic awards predicament. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So, part one, the historic awards predicament. And here is the upfront context on the regular season awards. So I am actually going to start here with the MVP. It's where everybody is actually, you know, thinking about and where their brains are actually concerned about, because that is such a insanely big deal for legacy and arguments on Twitter. So let's start there. And words are going to come out swinging. Let's just get this moving. So if you haven't been following the league that closely, I mean, obviously that's why I'm starting here. But I also think it is very important stage setting. The MVP award has historically been fucked. It is primarily a political campaign sponsored by coaches, teammates, broadcasters, rabid fans, and of course, the player candidates themselves. I wanted to kind of start off by just pointing out what I just think is hilarious about it is as soon as the league introduces a single objective qualifier, like the world implodes. Like people are like, how on earth could you possibly do this? That's not our history. And I just, it's just great. So I have to obviously applaud. I think everybody would agree at a certain level. There has to be a floor. I'm trying to remember what game it was this week, a few nights ago, but it was, it must have been a TNT game. So, you know, the great Stan Van Gundy was, you know, just running his mouth, and that came up, and he was like, yeah, well, you're not going to vote for somebody who's played in 10 games, right? So where's the line? And, you know, just make sure we're backed up all the way is like, somebody has an insane season and they're filling up the box score and helping their team. Let's say they're in first place, but they're playing half the games or something. Like, I mean, how close can the second place player be as far as that box score, as far as that impact before you're like, man, I think that other guy kind of deserves it a little more. There has to be a cutoff, right? Cool. So, a lot of nonstop whining about winners. So you have, for example, I just think last year is kind of where I'm trying to start here. There was already a lot of tension about the MVP stuff. Jokic had already won it twice in a row. Embiid is gunning for the MVP as if his and his entire extended family's lives depend on it. And he decided to tell Doc, his coach, as well as his GM, Daryl Morey, about it. His family being hostage, as well as the Philadelphia broadcasters for their games, because they really could not go a single game for Doc and Daryl, or maybe 3 minutes for the broadcasters to stop fucking babbling about how Embiid deserves the MVP. And what I love as well is pointing out what happened. So Jokic took his foot off the gas, Embiid ended up winning, and then cue the postseason. Philly didn't get anywhere. Jokic cakewalked, and I mean maybe the easiest cakewalk I have actually ever seen or heard of in any professional sport to the championship/title. Like, they went down, 2 games to Minnesota in the first round? In the first round, and they said after the entire postseason that was the hardest matchup they had. They swept the Lakers in the Western Finals, completely obliterated, I mean, let's be real, a pretty undermanned and undermatched Miami Heat team. So I say all that to say Embiid got the MVP, and then a lot of the public discussion was regret for... So Jokic was definitely way better and absolutely obliterated the competition in the postseason. This award is fucking stupid, and we're suckers. Great. And so let's rewind a little bit more about the confusion and tension over the qualifications. So that is the natural next topic of that conversation. We regret it. Okay, well then what actually went into the decision to award Embiid? Well, let's just look back a little bit farther. Okay, so 2014, Kevin Durant's only MVP. Obviously, the Spurs took home that title. That was one of the most beautiful egalitarian teams ever. But that was KD's MVP year. And after that, you have Steph Curry, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden all the way through 2018. So 2014, 2018, KD, Steph twice, Russ, Harden. I just picked this because I feel like most people are going to resonate with it. I don't think it's that controversial to say in that span of time, KD, LeBron, they were actually the best players in the league. But the MVP, of course, is closer leaning towards, like most people eventually accepted the MVP. It's not necessarily about who's the best player at a given time. It's about who campaigned the best and had the best opportunity to do so. Huge games, huge stats, huge upsets, huge stories. Also down years for your competition or hurt, injury, ridden years for your competition, things like that. We need to get some narratives involved here for who is really going to represent that season in, the tombstone. That's a bad metaphor, but you know what I mean. In the history books, let's use that one. In the history books to define that season, right? I mean, Russ averages a triple-double and carries that team, through the regular season, gets absolutely obliterated in the postseason, but don't worry about that. MVP, of course, is a regular season award. I hope that's very evident, but you know what I mean. It's not necessarily the best player. It's who's going to represent the season the most. Great. So I know I mentioned the metrics too, and I'm going to get to that in a second. Sorry, I don't know why that was up there in my notes. Clearly, I should have done a more careful audit before jumping in. Fuck it. All right, so that's what I wanted to point out there. MVP has never really been about the best player. Great. Okay. So next is that idea. Best player, best kind of representation of that year. This is why we have All-Star and All-NBA. So you probably have heard both of these things. They sound so similar. Maybe you didn't even really care enough to look into what the differences are and why they're both, and why a lot of times the same guys end up on both anyway, so what's the point? And I think it just goes to kind of get at and define and explain and illustrate what I'm trying to get at here. So really quickly, All-Stars. There are 24 spots, and you are competing with your conference. There are 2 conferences in the NBA. There are also, so let's just say 12 spots per conference. The positions reflect the positions on the court. So this is why you have incidents where this year Jalen Brunson doesn't get to be a starter because Damian Lillard was voted in to the All-Star starting backcourt. Cool. Those are the spots. And then how does the voting work? Well, 50% fans, 25% players, 25% media. Well, you can pump the brakes right there, because if it's 50% fans, it's going to become a popularity contest pretty fast. And also, I just want to point out that doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing. If you're more popular, that means you're probably generating more revenue for the enterprise that is, the entertainment conglomerate of the NBA. And so here's your pizza party for getting us paid. But obviously the issue then is that it's often used as a casual barometer or gauge of how good you are, when it, again, is literally half of fans who, maybe don't even study the league really, and blah, 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 blah. Great. Popularity, so tough barometer to use in that sense. Last thing I want to call out is there is an end game with that. So there is an actual All-Star game, which you've probably heard of, and you probably have only heard it in the context of terrible things and terrible lighting. There is no defense. There is really not much of a reason to watch it. It is it's truly just a gesture from the league of just watching hyper-athletic, skilled basketball players just fuck around on offense in the same gym. Everybody hates it, and that just needs a complete overhaul, potentially a topic for a completely separate podcast. But just want to point that out. And then the last thing is, because there is an all-star game, injuries matter. Like, Mike Conley got in. I'm trying to remember who got hurt. Was it I don't know if it was Kyrie. I can't even remember. This is like a few years back. But basically, if an all-star gets hurt for the game, taking a step back, you can literally have like 30 all-stars if enough people get hurt. Or whatever. So I just say that to say, right, it's a popularity thing and it's a literal event, and the actual award is a little bit diluted. All NBA, 15 spots total, and you are not just competing with your conference, you're competing with the league. Formerly by position, no longer by position starting this season. Why? Because it didn't make any fucking sense. For example, DeAndre Jordan was all NBA, and there is no way that he was kind of just the next in line when it comes to actual talent and impact. He was just the best remaining center in the Western Conference at that time. And, the next guys in line for the wings and guard positions were just infinitely better. But, right, so we have evolved, and it's no longer by position, but 15 spots total, you're competing with the overall league. How does the voting work? This is where it gets really fun. All NBA, MVP, here, I'll just give you the list right now. I was going to go into it later, but MVP, All NBA, Defensive Player of the Year, Clutch Player of the Year, Most Improved Player, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, All Defensive Team, and All Rookie are all decided by, and I quote, a global panel of 100 sports writers and broadcasters. These individuals are never named. Many of them reveal themselves because they are media members, so they will be on podcasts, and you will hear mentions of this. Oh, I have a vote this year. Or no, I don't have a vote this year. I didn't want to do it. That's what we mean. The league does not, again, publicize a list of, hey, here are all the voters and who they voted for. It is the epitome of a black box. So obviously the idea and vision there is you have a bunch of sickos who literally spend their waking lives writing about and watching and analyzing the game. So they get a vote. So great. What I just want to point out about that is the thing about media in the league, and I'm not breaking any news here, is that their incentives are just so aligned. Without the league being a good product to sell, the media has no great product to write about and talk about, which in an increasingly talented league can lead to increasing senses of being snubbed. Camera pans to Sacramento. How on earth were Sabonis and Fox off the All-Star? But again, that is half fans. So I don't know how many people live in Sacramento or give a shit about watching those games, but De'Aaron Fox is honestly a top 10 player in the league, and it blows my mind. But again, we're not talking about that. We don't get visibility into the voting outcomes as well. So you have 15 spots. How close was the 16th guy? You have no idea. Interesting. There is no end game. It is just an honor, right? There is no all-NBA game. And obviously, there are no injury replacements. Okay. So that is a lot of the what. So here's the so what. To be an all-star, you have to win the hearts and minds of the fans and media and players, but mainly fans. And never mind that nobody gives a shit about the all-star game itself. It's just fans, here's your little pizza party. Go ahead and vote and feel important and watch this awful product of a game. And then to win all of the remaining and all of those other in-season awards and honors that I listed off there, to win any of those, Adam Silver's Illuminati Council has to be on your side. And also, they're not going to tell you how close you got if you didn't make it. Double also, back to the metrics. Nobody I'm talking about, whether it's the Illuminati Council, whether it's the all-star voters and the fans and the media and the players, nobody is using a standard set of qualifiers or qualifications or metrics when they're voting. So everybody I'm talking about has slightly different approaches. Sounds like a great recipe for a lot of harmony and civil discourse and discussion about people's thoughts and feelings. But why does the league let it be that way? Who is behind that reality, and what's their motivation for keeping it that way? That is exactly the kind of question that demonstrates why I started this podcast. Not just hey, I can poke around on Google for 40 minutes and figure out all these things and how things work and whatever. But I am a big, I guess, psychological, motive-driven person. I love thinking about and mapping sort of why people make the decisions they do, why they don't, and those sorts of things. So here we go with that. So why are we cool with just letting everybody kill each other? And not offering some kind of objective truth. Obviously, the camera is going to pan to the 65-game threshold, which was the first attempt at doing that. But before this year, they didn't have that. So what is the motivation there? Well, obviously, it's the league. So ultimately, if things got so out of hand and controversial, Adam Silver would have to finally intervene and govern and introduce actual metrics. Obviously, why would he do that when more controversy means more buzz, more views, more profit? Great. And so this is the way to think about it, I would. After doing this research, this is how I would think about it. The NBA gives to fans the All-Star vote so that they feel like shareholders who have partial ownership of deciding things that, air quote, matter. But everything else that is tied to incentives in players' contracts, I think I saw Tyrese Halliburton, for example, if he makes All-NBA, I think is up for upwards of $40 million extra on top of his $200 and some odd $1 million contract if he's first team NBA. First team All-NBA. So just to give you just a sense of what we're talking about there, of how much is on the line. And again, the fact that we don't even know who these voters are that are deciding these things is really, really interesting. A couple quick ideas as we go along here that I just want to point out before we actually bring it back in is the black box thing makes sense if you are the league, right? You have your own board of directors, your own governance board that, everybody here is super qualified. My name is Adam Silver, and I've hand selected everybody. I've carried out the recruiting process and vetted all the bad candidates out. Why would I ever entertain the idea of checks and balances or voter transparency or votes transparency? Why would I allow neutral voters to play a role for that matter? Well, if me, Adam Silver, appointed and okayed the members of my Illuminati Council deciding these things, why would I ever need to veto their votes if I pick them? Why would I want them vulnerable to scrutiny from fans by releasing their names and or votes publicly? Why would I be open to letting fans or players, active or retired, appoint their own proxy voters for these awards to bring it back to business school? Why would he allow that? Well, like I said before, why are they all, quote, 100 sports writers and broadcasters? They're all media because they all share the same financial incentive just like twins in the womb. Would 20 out of those 100 voters being chosen by the players themselves really be that risky to your profit? I don't know. But I also just think that that's kind of good. I don't know. I obviously, I what I don't want to say is I don't want to say like they're always wrong and whatever, and there have been just way too many snubs and you're costing people money and blah blah blah. And honestly, that's a big reason why you hear a lot of big time journalists say like, "Hey, I don't even want to vote this year because it's just getting too talented. Like I just don't feel good on my conscience if I'm just deciding if you're literally going to make $40 million extra or not." Never mind the fact you're already making $250 million, Tyrese. I'm sorry. But I digress. So, half step back. Why am I telling you all this again? Okay. It's because everybody cares about fighting over the outcomes of these awards and the results of these awards and honors, but not that many of us care enough to learn the actual process and players that drive them. So, you're welcome. Softly. Obviously, there's a lot more to this, but I'm just a freak, so I love to share what I'm able to find. So I want you to know that. And then I also want to just disclaim one last time, I'm not saying that the outcomes of most of these awards and honors, like the non-All-Star ones, basically, the Illuminati ones, I'm not saying they're wrong. What I am just trying to get out there is that as fans and admirers of the league, we're technically playing in the NBA's sandbox or matrix when it comes to the outcomes of these award decisions. We're playing in the NBA sandbox and we're fighting each other's perspectives and feelings on greatness with ammunition that the NBA itself has ultimately decided on and gave to us. So I just think it's easy to lose sight of that. If it was a democracy, then we can kill each other. But until then, I think we just need to calm down a little and, keep that in mind. We don't even know who decided on these things ultimately. And in an increasingly talented league, that's only going to become more problematic. And I think you can tell why I chose to bring this up in lead up to the Jokic Embiid MVP decisions. All right. So that wraps up part one, the historical awards predicament. Next is part two, where we're going to talk about the new awards predicament. Coming up. All right. Part two, the new awards predicament. What exactly is the new playing threshold for regular season awards? Is it simply 65 games? What qualifies as playing those games? Are there any exceptions? So, 65 games played is the requirement for consideration for all of those lovely in-season awards and honors I mentioned. What qualifies as playing a game? Well, it's at least 20 minutes. However, there are a couple exceptions. You are allowed to near misses, quote, in which the player appeared for 15 to 19 minutes. 2 of those. There are also protections in place for season-ending injuries after 62 games, and what are termed as, air quote, bad faith circumstances. And as far as I can tell, that basically refers to if Draymond stabs you in the spleen with a pen midway through game number 61, you're safe. I think that's smart. So just want to add some more context in that because obviously Embiid, I mean, it's tough for Embiid. I think that's pretty much out the window now. But even guys like Halliburton, I think are they're really not that far behind him. So just in case that becomes relevant, I just found those things really interesting. The only thing I want to mention as well is not a surprise, but if you didn't know this, the like NBA players have like a labor union. Essentially, it's called the players union, right? And what they do is obviously lobby for players' rights, how much they deserve to be paid, and especially in the wake of things like a new TV deal, which the NBA is very quickly coming up on. Players deserve to have a pretty big chunk of the pie, and yada yada yada. Players Union agreed to these rules before the season. The coaches and owners also agreed to it. So it isn't like a dictatorship in like Soviet Russia in like 1970, right? Adam didn't just like, one click send this into everyone's inbox and they woke up on a Tuesday and were like, what the fuck? Embiid is just crying in his Lambo. Great. Next, why is it so controversial? Well, I have the first main argument is unfair / unrealistic. The season's way too long as it is. Guys are getting injured more than ever. It's just kind of a risk, and you don't want to be messing with people's psyches as far as that incentive structure when it comes to the actual behavioral decisions that they end up making, which leads to the second piece. First piece is just objectively the season is just too long. I think that's just a stupid idea. You should just reduce the length of the regular season. Let's just move on from that. The second argument is the risk factor. You're incentivizing guys to risk further injury or risk injury by pushing themselves to play to keep themselves in contention. And obviously, that is what you hear a lot of about the Embiid thing. Those are really the two main things. It was a lot of just reaction, right? It's not like, I don't think there's a super strong like pro argument, other than it's just fucking inevitable. Back to the Stan Van Gundy thing, like, you're not going to vote for someone who only played 10 games, so why don't we just figure that out? And I think he's onto something as to the why. Like, why now? Why actually move forward with making a change? So let's qualify the arguments there. Unfair and unrealistic. Let's just start off the bat here. I know that there are freaks like LeBron, where durability, body maintenance, etc., just apparently seem to happen. And side note, I've made this joke at least 12 times in the past 24 hours on Twitter. Embiid really needs to call up LeBron and find a new German doctor because this is getting ridiculous. Certain guys are just more durable than others, and that's really clear. But 65 games out of 82 regular season games means you have 17 games to miss. Some really simple math, that comes out to 21% of the total games you are allowed to skip in theory. And so what does that come out to? You can skip about 1 out of every 5 games if you were to evenly map that out. And if you took that fraction and applied it to the span of time that guys are actually playing in the regular season, holding aside like holidays and whatever, you have about 19 weeks of actual regular season play. So 21% of that is around 4, which means you get about 4 full weeks off of a 6-month job out of the year. So just putting that in perspective, obviously this is professional sports at the highest levels. It's very, very different than the rest of us worrying about staying hydrated at our standing desks. But I just think these are the kinds of numbers where, I'm just trying to paint a clearer picture here, because you just hear a lot of takes on, you might not even hear the difference between 65 games and 82 games. Like 17 games doesn't even sound like that much. And then you do the simple math, and it's like you can literally skip 1 out of every 5 games. And I just feel like framing these things a little bit differently in ways like that. Like, I don't know why nobody does, but there you go. So you can skip 1 out of every 5. Next. So before Embiid went down in Golden State, he was already on pace to have played in the second fewest games that an MVP recipient, if he were to win, would have played. The second fewest games played. Bill Walton played only 58 games when he won, and so I also don't hear a ton of buzz about that. And I say that to say I think the all-time legend Zach Lowe mentioned on his pod that came out earlier today. Just a really good objector take. So even if you took away this 65 game threshold, I think that most of the time the Illuminati voters, they have somewhere in their brains an informal amorphous threshold as is. And again, the fact that Embiid was on such a pace like that, as is, again, there is reason to believe he would have pushed himself to play anyway, basically is what I'm saying. So I didn't really, deduce that myself, give credit where it's due. But I just think it's really fair to point out, 1, the pace he was at, but then 2, there is some level of precedent in place to the voters when it comes to this. Great. 3, again, for the unfair, unrealistic argument, I just want to call out again the thing about last year because, again, it does not get brought up enough as far as I can tell. Mad voters regretted voting for Embiid once they saw Jokic absolutely light the league on fire in the postseason. And again, it's a regular season award. We want to remember the season by these players. Okay. There is no fucking way Embiid should have won MVP last year. Let's just call that what it is. This is Jokic's dynasty, and until he is done, just like Giannis winning back-to-back and whatever, I think if anything, it's almost, I don't want to say belittling, but it's almost like sad, right? So in that train of logic, who do we want to remember the season by? Well, it's Embiid, right? I mean, he was just insane in the regular season. Okay, great. But then what is the next thing that's going to come out of your mouth? Oh, yeah, he got fucking rocked. He got torched in the postseason. And also, Jokic didn't drop more than 2 games in 4 rounds and literally had the most easiest, effortless-looking championship run. Anyway, great work. Great work, everybody. Which also leads to a random side note thing. You guys can tell I just think I have a pretty good knack at thinking outside of the box. Why don't we award Ironmen? Like, I just feel like you hear talking heads and media figures just throw out things like, I value durability, I just think you got to be available. I think it's important. On one hand, it's like, well, fuck yeah, Sherlock, good work. But on the other hand, back to what I'm saying with the 20% of total games missed and blah, blah, blah to even qualify, you're like, that's gotta be kind of fucking hard, honestly. I forget the stats for Bron, but he was just unbelievably durable. And again, it's not like he's sustained. It's not like he had some crazy looking falls or incidents. Like he just the dude just wasn't vulnerable to anything slowing him down. So anyway, I just think that it just needs to be celebrated in a more intentional way, and it could be a very interesting idea from an incentive perspective. Again, not a penalty for qualifying, but an incentive perspective. If we just had a little honor, had a little award for the Iron Man of the year, who played the most games, or who played the most minutes, maybe we take that approach. I don't know. I didn't really think too much on that thing, but I just realized I just think that should be a fundamental thing that everybody can get behind. Like, if you're just fucking available, I think you deserve some kind of award. Again, that is probably going to need some degree of a cutoff because you're going to have I don't fucking know, some fucking useless person, no offense, on like Washington who just, yeah, I played a lot. Or like, Tony Snell comes to mind, who just like absolutely no stats, but just hella minutes. Like, I don't know. Yeah, you can qualify that, but side note or idea. Okay. So unfair, unrealistic, 20% of games. Embiid was already on pace to be this, second fewest number of games played by an MVP recipient. Probably was going to play anyway. And then the Iron Man Award. Okay, great. So I kind of want to keep moving along here because this could easily become very, very long and in-depth, and I'm actually going to skip over some other things I was going to talk about, but they're ancillary. So let's speed ahead to the so what here. One, outright bans are hard to stomach. This is a thoroughly researched psychological condition and pathway where if you threaten people with a ban, they're just going to hate it more. Right. Certain players have a harder time staying healthy than others, which feels disadvantageous and unfair. If you're getting hacked down low, my brain goes to Domantas Sabonis, who is just absolutely bodied on every fucking play. I'm not even gonna, don't even get me started on the whistle shit. I mean, obviously the refereeing is its own thing, but that dude, if you're just down low and that's your game, I guess you're just more susceptible potentially to injury and all of that. Great. But then on the other side, you have what Embiid has done. So you heard me bring up last week, Embiid had played 4 road games against teams who were above 500. I think I'm pretty sure he qualified as playing in that Golden State game. So now actually, I take that back. Shout out my Bay pals. Y'all aren't actually 500, so never mind. Still only 4. But basically, the flip side of it feeling disadvantageous and unfair is what Embiid has done, which is treating the NBA like it's the UFC, where he's picking and choosing the matchups he wants to play in and objectively skewing the sample of data we have to analyze how good he really actually is. He's just obliterating shitty teams and driving his own narrative while also managing to play potentially the second fewest games an MVP winners ever won. You can tell how I feel about him, or at least this season and this kind of scheming. So punchline there, both sides. That's disadvantageous and unfair. So then what happens? You are nudging behaviors like, okay, well, if I know I'm not that durable, I'm going to pick my spots even harder. Try and stop me. Great. So next conclusion. It's inevitable. I know I mentioned this off the top and mentioned the Stan Van Gundy take twice now, but as we've discussed, it feels like a no-brainer thing to have a floor threshold and maybe not a loftier target upper target, I guess, as opposed to a floor. I also think that, as we've discussed, the fact that there is no accepted set of standards, and we are just, objectively going to see variance in how voters evaluate certain candidates, changes and rules like these are inevitable. And again, as the league gets even more talented and we're kind of splitting hairs here, and races between players like Jokic and Embiid, it's inevitable. It really is. And you can't really argue with at least the notion and the impetus behind these steps being taken. And so Adam introduced virtually the only common thread the league could agree on, which is that playing threshold. I think the basically sub-bullet to that is there's a lot of fucking money on the line for a lot of players, which also, side note, Embiid can't really win too much more money. He's already gotten every Supermax. So as far as that incentive is concerned, it is a little different. But again, we're in theory land still. There's a lot of money on the line. People have different metrics that go into it or approaches to assessing people, and the league is just getting more and more talented, so it's just going to be closer and closer to splitting hairs. And so you can understand why the league got to this point. And so this is where I get to some of my ideas for how to improve the change that the league introduced. And that starts from a place of we're asking the wrong question. It's not a yes or no to keeping the 65 game cutoff or not. It's why is it insufficient and how do we make it more sufficient to being fair, equitable, while also rewarding and awarding the right players when we think about these awards. All right, so now we're going to dive in here. I lied. Not the proposal yet, but these are my two root causes that are going to lead to the way I designed the proposal. Okay, root cause number one, misconception. The 65 game cutoff erroneously assumes that all games are equal, which I think we can all agree is very untrue, and even more so, it is untrue for literally every single party or stakeholder involved in every single game. So certain games matter more than others because for the league, you have national broadcast games, you have marketed events like the in-season tournament and the Rivals Week and the All-Star Game and blah, blah, blah. So, you have potential revenue gains, et cetera. You have the fans also, obviously. Oh my fucking God. Can you imagine if you lived in Denver and you had circled that matchup in September and bought the tickets and splurged on 100 section seats with your, in-laws or fucking kids, and Embiid backs out literally 10 minutes before? I can't even imagine. For fans, the prices of the tickets obviously change because certain matchups are more intense than others, which again implies that is a pretty clear conduit to suggest certain games matter more than others. You also have gambling odds. Awesome. You also have the time you're willing to invest in it, as well as the experience. So yeah, back to matchups like those. If it doesn't work out, you just value those games more as a fan. You also have the non-star players, similar to the league. I don't really know the breakdown, but if you're in a mid-tier market and you get on a national game and you're the seventh man on the fucking Orlando Magic, if you're Wendell Carter Jr., who I'm going to just go out on a limb and guess most people have no fucking idea who that dude is, and he's their best three-point shooter as their center, that is kind of it's a good shot for you. You're in the national spotlight. Obviously, the team is doing pretty well. That's just, I promise, a completely random dude I'm just pulling on my ass. But think about it. Those games obviously matter more. For the stars, everything we've been saying about this whole thing, if you're in really big matchups, those are the times you get to drive your own narrative for consideration for these awards. Not to mention the overall legacy, et cetera, et cetera. We are talking about the regular season, of course, as far as you can get. And then the last thing I want to throw out too, which I feel like gets overlooked, but I have to think it matters, is the coaching staff. So again, I'm just going to run with this Denver-Philly thing. If you have Embiid back out or you just have a matchup go awry because whatever, your top player is out, I think about that Milwaukee versus Boston game where Porzingis didn't play and Milwaukee won by 30 points. How is that even going to help you for postseason planning? It's not just for the entertainment value. These people get paid a shit ton of money to study your game. And I think it ultimately results in a better product when you're able to have those postseason preview matchups. So that begs the question, Is it really about the quantity of games you're playing, or is it the quality? Fuck, botched that. Whatever. You get the point. So that's root cause number one, misconception. I think it's a bit misconceived. Not every game is equal. Root cause number two, misdirection. I'm going to start with this question. Would Embiid have been injured if he had decided to rest in lead up to the Denver game and the Golden State game? And I know Portland was in the middle there, but do you think he would have been injured if he decided to rest in lead up to Denver? And I know I said this last week. He did play Indiana 2 days before that game. I tried to find a pretty clear video of that injury that he had in that Pacers game, and I'm not going to lie, it really doesn't look that bad. And I know I'm talking for the guy, but I just want to put that out there. If he didn't play that game, do you think he still would have gotten deathly injured in Denver or Golden State? Like, the reason I asked that question, I want to start there, is don't be tricked into thinking he didn't know the upcoming schedule. Like, this is really fucking obvious. But I said it last week, and I just really like how I landed on phrasing it, is what I wanted, what you wanted, I'm sure, what the league wanted, what Adam Silver wanted, what Malone wanted, what Jokic wanted, is Embiid to come out into that game as if he had that game circled since fucking September, right? Come out swinging. You haven't played us since 2019. You're having the best season of your career. Everybody's sucking you off. Let's fucking dance at altitude. What kind of narrative are you willing, to risk, essentially? We got it's like Denver, Boston. If I'm Denver, we're whatever, like second or top championship odds. Let's fucking go, big guy. You want to run the league? Let's dance. Like I said, penalties are psychologically and biologically perceived as harsher than incentives, right? When you take things away, people react a lot worse to that. So do we really mean to reward players for helping their team more often on the court, or doing their duty to preserve their bodies so they're able to be on the court more? Or do we mean to just punish people for skipping games? Is this about rewarding, or is this about penalizing? Here's the so what. Is the risk of eliminating players from contention just going to spark more anger from that primitive limbic system part of our minds? Would flipping it into an incentive structure be better received? If so, is there a way to bring it to life so that it's still fair and still effective? And I just want to put a bow on that. That's all I had for this root cause. So the misdirection piece, you can tell what I mean there. It's a penalty instead of an incentive, and you'll kind of see where I'm moving here. But I just want to put a bow on that first point I was trying to make. Coming out like you had that circled on the schedule, nobody is talking about the fact that within the bounds of the regular season, that one game, that one matchup against Denver is, by and large, and it's not even close, the biggest game of your entire regular season. No question. I don't know how you can actually argue with that, given how the pushback was last year, given the outspoken regret after voting Embiid MVP and getting fucking wrecked in the postseason and all of those things. How on earth do you not come into the season and have that circled? And sorry, my sub-bullet take inside of that, I think he did. I think that was actually the first fucking game he looked at as soon as the schedule dropped was, when is that game? And he no doubt had known that forever. So that just brings up my sub point there is nobody's fucking talking about the fact that he could have just sat that Pacers game, just to be sure he could put the questions to bed, drive his own narrative, take control of this entire fucking season, and kind of put a nail in this coffin. But what did he do? What did he do? I'm not saying he faked the injury in Indiana. I'm not saying he faked the injury for Denver. What I am saying, like I said last week, is there was ample missed opportunity for him there. And that is supremely disappointing. Great. So those are my two main root causes after thinking about this stuff a lot. Again, thinking about the 65-game cutoff. Root cause number one, misconception. We're assuming all 65 games are equal, which we all know they aren't. Root cause number two is misdirection. If you want everybody to listen to you and buy into your new rules or just any change, maybe take a look at the volumes of psychology research and studies around penalties versus incentives. It might stand a better chance of not causing this much uproar. Also, if you have Embiid as one of the top 3 faces of your league and the guy apparently cannot get himself in good enough shape to play at altitude, then you're kind of going to be boned either way. So anyway, those are the 2 ones I'm going to work with. And now we're going to move into part 3 coming up, my proposal prototype for improving the new rule for in-season eligibility. All right, coming up. All right, welcome back. Part 3, Skyler's proposal prototype / wireframe for how to make the new eligibility threshold better, improved. Great. So 2 main components here. Like I said, I am far from an expert. Little thing about me and my whatever background. Yeah, I was a research consultant for a few years. And interestingly enough, one of the parts of that job that I looked at was executive compensation. And so I published some whatever professional services, content types and white papers and fucking reports and whatever about this. And that is the closest thing I have to qualifications for this, to, motivate a CEO to give a shit about the environment, for example, is really fucking hard. Like I said before, money is the really only way and conduit that we have to actually driving effective behavior change. So that is kind of the approach I took. And so I guess I'm telling you that because it's not like I'm a doctor who just cares about player safety or whatever. I'm not an agent. I'm not just talking about players' rights and just campaigning, all across the land, and whatever the players want is what they deserve and blah, blah, blah. I'm coming at this like a business consultant, which I might be by day. So I got 2 main components. And the last thing I just want to say, these are just kind of ideas, right? I mean, obviously, I'm sure there are holes to poke in these and whatever. I just don't see enough solutioning or even attempts to solution out there. It's just a lot of feelings. I'm not trying to be on my high horse and act like a condescending douchebag, but I really wish people thought harder about this. I know I'm a freak, and that is just, crazy that I would dedicate this much time and effort to, but I'm not even an actual beat writer or staff writer or employee of the league, but I'm doing this anyway. So anyway, if you see anybody who's out there putting out ideas, please link me or send me their work and or names. Thank you very much. Okay. Did be hard to quantify how many components this really has, but I've got 2 big high-level buckets here. The first one is radical transparency. And then bucket number one is Scooby-Doo, who are you? As fans, we're often at the mercy of the media when it comes to narratives on who should and shouldn't be considered and or given awards. And as we've learned, we don't get to make the ultimate decisions, nor know who the decision makers even are. Given that disconnect, we are vulnerable to being misled when it counts. Conclusion. Why don't we think a little bit more about making the talking heads and the Shadow Council Illuminati members put their votes where their mouths are a little bit more? Granted, it's not in the best interest of Adam Silver nor the media to do this, but again, I am taking sort of that fan approach. Will Stephen A. be less entertaining on First Take if he has to kind of talk a little bit more well-informed, well-educated about what's going on? We all love Jalen Brunson. If he's the MVP, I'm sorry, I don't necessarily know if I'm quite there. We'll see where the Knicks land. If they get to the second seed, we'll see. But, I think it's fair to be floating these sort of ideas. But, will the Stephen A. and all of his colleagues, be a little less entertaining, but a little more fucking educated in what they throw out there? And again, just want to point to the fact that a lot of these narratives get driven by the media, and they actually have a lot of control over these things. And so it actually really does matter. Will it empower fans to hold voters accountable for ensuring that award recipients reflect the modern league? So, for example, back to the 100 panel of 100, whatever, global sports writers, whatever. I love old media, so whatever, we'll just roll with Stephen A. These guys who grew up through the ranks as reporters and now they're entertainers, I love them. I really do. I think that they bring just a great, it sounds weird to say it this way, but to me at least, it's almost refreshing kind of perspective on things. But a lot of times, these are the same fucking people who say stupid shit, like today's NBA is soft. And, the fact that Dellavedova had to get all but airlifted to an emergency room after trying to guard Steph Curry for a fucking final series. That doesn't matter. Pace and space is stupid. And, the defensive rules and the fact you have to run probably 3 to 4 times as far and at higher speeds and change of directions, even more important, blah, 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 blah. No, you just can't be 330 pounds and just fucking run into shit. This league is just soft. So that's just another sort of point under that bucket. Scooby-Doo, who are you? I would love to see who these voters are, at least. I think that will just make that relationship between the league and the broader fan base a little bit more genuine, a little more human. I'm not even advocating necessarily that we, get the proxy vote or any sort of representation in there. Again, it makes a lot of sense from the league perspective. To have your own appointees and whatever, people are fucking paid to do this shit, actually ultimately make the decisions. But I guess the best way I would put it is if this whole Jokic, Embiid, or insert anybody else, I don't know, maybe we'll have the same thing with Shea and Luka for the next, fucking 15 years. If this whole thing goes to shit, I'm going to tell you right now, that is going to be the reason why. If we don't even know who these, you don't even have to tell us how they were picked. I just started a podcast and taking this whole NBA, whatever, journalism, sports, media reporting thing, by the throat, and I love it, whatever. I'm not even saying that I want to figure out, how long have you been a reporter and who the fuck did you meet? Whose dick did you suck to get this role? I just think, literally knowing the names of the voters who decide on these sorts of things, I just really think that is just important, and not to get too Enlightenment AP Euro, AP US with it, but it almost just feels a little bit weird. Before we had the Enlightenment era and, we discovered people should have the freedom of speech and shit like that. That's pretty weird. So you don't even have to share how they were just Jesus Christ. Okay. Also within radical transparency, touch on this or hinted at this earlier. This one is called Injury Reporter Doctor. You can tell I really love coming up with names with shit. If I were a producer for an actual show, that might be my favorite part. So what do I mean? So the injury reporting, obviously the incident in Denver with Embiid backing out last second raised a lot of eyebrows. I also read that Trey Murphy for the New Orleans Pelicans did something similar, where you just fail to report the actual status of guys' injuries, and then out of nowhere they just back out. And for obvious reasons, that fucks over a lot of people. Like, why would I buy the tickets? And what are the gambling odds? And blah, 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 blah. So we need closer inspection of alleged injuries by neutral parties, underline or capital neutral. I already gave the example for the fans, forking up the cash to sit in the hundreds section with your family for one fucking game out of the entire regular season, and you fuck me over. I got no time for that. That is what it is. So I think better explanation by a neutral party is what's needed. And you're going to notice an underlying theme here. And this is why Fortune 500 companies are audited by third parties, big time consulting or accounting firms, is because you need somebody without vested interest actually looking into your shit. I think this is also probably the best time to bring up the whole cheating scandal from the referees around the turn of the century, when that news broke. The NBA and David Stern was like, we got it. We're going to investigate it ourselves. And then they didn't. And then they had an external party come the fuck in there. Basically, the feds had to come in and be like, we don't trust you to actually fix this problem. You're not incentivized to actually get rid of it. And that looked really good on the NBA. So there we go. This whole load management and alleged injuries by neutral parties, the NBA has so much money to make up however many fucking committees it wants. Not to mention this Illuminati committee who decides on awards. Why can't we just have that for these fucking injuries? Let's get like 3 people, full-time jobs. Well, we do have a lot of games, so you probably need more. But you're self-reporting your own shit. I don't know how much people trust it. Again, if you want to bestow or ensue a sense of confidence in the shit, I think that's the right way to do it. You got to have better explanation and better auditing by neutral parties of these certain, health statuses or whatever, at least past a certain point. If you're a top 25 and up player and you've got these kinds of matchups, think about the UFC. I know now I'm flip-flopping here. I'm a hypocrite, but the UFC, you weigh in before you fucking fight or wrestle or both, I think. Let's do some shit like that. That's what I want. If you're injured, let's do a little bit of test here on that, and we make sure that we're being truthful. A lot of money in the line. And so in addition to kind of those auditors, I suppose, is introducing a role for each team to serve as the spokesperson and or just owner for injury reporting decisions. So where this came from, I think this is important to start with, is you hear a lot of former players talk about the load management thing as, that's not the players, we didn't come up with that shit. They just fucking roll with that. They crunch some numbers. It spits out on the, you got 82 games in the schedule. We need Embiid here. So to optimize his performance, he's going to skip in 5 games in October and blah, blah, whatever the fuck. Okay, great. So then you have what happened in Denver happen, and You have the league fine the entirety of the 76ers franchise. I think it was like $75,000 for failing to report that injury, right, and lead up appropriately. And I don't think that's good enough, is really what I'm trying to get at. Somebody needs to be held accountable, specifically accountable. We don't get to like lump that into some amorphous like amoeba of a whole fucking franchise and be like, yeah, it was a collective failure. No, we like this is what I'm talking. Like accountability matters. Back to the executive incentivizing shit. Like accountability is really like the carrot is the money. The stick is the accountability. So, Joel backing out at the last second should frankly never happen again without someone losing their fucking job. How about that? So who is accountable for that? Like I said, apparently, according to the league, the entire Sixer franchise is. Same with New Orleans. So just follow me with this, okay? If you care so much about players' health, how come there isn't an actual person whose entire job it is to make sure injuries and injury reporting are managed effectively? Obviously, I'm assuming there isn't a person with that role already. My hunch is, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's a head trainer. Do we know them? Fuck no, we don't. Does anybody talk about, who ultimately is at fault? My brain goes to like the Kawhi thing in San Antonio, where that got really weird before he came over to Toronto. Go fucking Raptors, where he didn't feel ready to play, but they wanted him to play, and there was like a really weird scenario where people like he's just intentionally skipping game, blah, 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 blah. Turns into a he said, she said very quickly. I mean, who actually doesn't want him to play? Whose fucking decision-making authority is it to play or not play? Like, I don't know, you're an employee, but you're also an athlete, and we also need you. Like, it gets really weird, and so that's why I just think, like, we need to be a little more radically transparent. And so let me put it even more in context here, because I think this is really going to hammer it home. Whose fault is it really that Joel played in that Golden State game? Or as long as he did in that Golden State game, despite looking like a dying giraffe. Everybody, right now I sound like the dramatic media. A lot of people wanted to blame Denver fans. You're ducking us. You're a bitch. You're ducking us. How about you play? You're ducking big games. What the fuck? Then you get in his head, and then he tries to play when he shouldn't play, and then he gets hurt. What did you expect? My take is, what about the fucking training staff? This whole idea that I'm running with right now. What about the training staff? What about the head trainer? What about Nick Nurse? Let me put it to you this way. If I was in a very, very different multiverse, a 76ers fan, and I watched that first half of Joel Embiid trying to play in that game, I would be fucking furious with Nick Nurse and the training staff. How on earth did you let that man come back in the second half? How did you not spend the entirety of halftime begging him and getting his fucking buy-in to not risk the entire season by pushing himself like this? Dude, I know you're an Oscar-worthy actor, Embiid. Frankly, 50% to 2/3 of your entire game is acting. Let's call it what it is here. I love watching you shoot 3 free throws. I love watching it. It's awesome. The comp to Harden, I just really, again, don't think it's brought up enough, but yada, yada. Your job as a head coach and a head trainer is to protect the health and safety of your players. More so with the coach, your job is to get the buy-in of your best players to not make selfish decisions. That's what Embiid was doing. And I don't think this is being talked about enough. It is selfish to risk your own health for your own accolades, your own individual accolades, when we all know and we have seen the fucking film 6 times now? You're not that fucking guy, Embiid. You're not durable. Why the fuck are we playing around right now? You're being an idiot. And look at what happened. All right? And so again, put yourself back at halftime. If you're Nick Nurse, and you know Embiid cares a lot about his legacy and his narrative. He cares a lot about it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be ducking and picking his spots all the time. Just let me help you save face here, dude. Me being Nick Nurse. Let me just help you save face. I'm going to just come out. I will say it before in that weird, like, second half tip-off. Like, yeah, I shut him down. We just talked about it. I saw the way he looked and talked to our head trainer. We're like, no, I'm sorry, bro. Yeah, so you are going to fucking destroy your, barely intact kneecaps. And this is the best shot that we've had to actually make a postseason run since you've been on the fucking team. How about that? So specifically with the trainers, I just want to say it this way as well, because I think there is a level of hypocrisy here. So back to what guys like Raja Bell will say and JJ will say, and just a lot of the whatever, retiree players, whatever, with the whole load management wasn't the player's idea, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, and now I'm talking to Adam Silver, right? I'm talking to league. If you let load management run wild and you give the trainers or whatever, you give the staff of the team the power to sit their star players in certain games, right? Raja was telling a story when he was working for the Cavs and he had to personally tell LeBron, like, hey, like the training staff said, we know you don't have an injury, but you're not going to play tonight. And obviously he was like, word, okay. So if you allow that to happen, you also have to hold the training staff accountable for when the opposite happens in the worst possible way. When they let a player jump into this fucking game when they shouldn't. How are we not talking about this more? And I'm going to put it in one last way. I'm going to put it in a third fucking way. Imagine you're Daryl Morey. Imagine you're the GM of the team watching that first half, and Embiid is a dying giraffe or gazelle or whatever the fuck you want to call it. It hurt to watch. And you're looking at the schedule down the pipeline thinking, yeah, this is our best shot that we've had since Joel's been. What on earth are you doing? And that's an inclusive you. What are you doing? Yeah, inclusive you. Embiid, Nick, trainers. What the fuck are we doing right now? You got your MVP. I know you're having an all-time season. You're really jeopardizing our best shot at this, Embiid. It would be different if you had lasted a single postseason, but you haven't. Okay? And I'm going to get to this when we talk about the Embiid specific series of events and the case study and my analysis on this, but I think there are, unfortunately, there's more, you have to give more credence to the idea that Embiid is okay with being a martyr for this new rule than he wants to admit. Unclear if he can even stay healthy for an entire playoff series. I'm sorry. Someone's got to say it. It's really unclear at this point if he can even last an entire high-level, high-intensity, high-pressure playoff series. So, anyway. So, back to, the original idea here. For introducing a role for each team to serve as a spokesperson, whatever, point of contact, owner of injury reporting decisions, all things injuries, who's going to sit, who is not, and why, and who was not allowed to return for the second half and why, and blah, blah, blah. Philadelphia as an overall franchise was fine for the injury reporting error, right? You got to keep that shit up to date, and you backed out and cost a lot of people money. Cool. I just want to bring up one last point. That is a destructive risk, or potentially destructive risk, for another reason, because if you don't have that transparency, again, we're still inside of the transparency bucket. If you don't have that, you're inviting the narrative that the player is making all of these decisions himself, right? Everything that I'm saying about Embiid picking his spots or whatever, that could just be the load management from the training staff. I think of myself as a pretty open-minded person and more than willing to change my perspective on these things. I think we have more than enough data at this point to reasonably confidently conclude that it's not just that. But let's say it was. Well, you're just letting that narrative grow and evolve. Because everybody's just erroneously assuming that it was all his decision anyway, especially with the last minute thing. I know they said in the reporting of whatever, like, we let Embiid warm up and blah, blah, blah. And then right before, the thing was going to go, we just pulled the trigger on it ourselves and decided he wasn't going to play or whatever. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's my point, is you're doing a disservice to Embiid, you're doing a disservice to the league, you're doing a disservice to the fans. All of the stakeholders and parties I've already walked through. So that's just another thing. That's why transparency is helpful. Okay. That's bucket number one. Let me take a sip. Hold on. Man, I'm sorry. This episode's going to be super long. All right. So that's radical transparency. Really quick recap. Scooby-Doo, who are you? Voters, who the fuck are you? Injury reporter, doctor, person, CEO, CIO, chief injury officer. I don't know. Somebody's got to be accountable for this shit, and it's getting out of hand. So let's just think about that a little bit more closely, because it's not as simple as Embiid gets to pick when he plays or not. We have load management. We have a lot of shit going on. We need to be able to tell whose fucking decision it is so that we know what the fuck's going on. All right? Yeah, great. Okay. Next bucket. Dynamic commitment devices. So this is a fun part. This is what I'd really love to hear your guys' feedback on. All regular season games are unequal, as we've covered. So why would we penalize players who are gunning for awards like they are equal? So with penalties, I think what I recommend, obviously this is a proposal, I think you have to save the cutoff or the quote floor, like eligibility cutoff. I think you got to keep that pretty low. I think you need like a lowest common denominator thing, something that's universally acceptable. Again, it should be a floor, not like ceiling is obviously not the right word, but like it should be a floor, not like a loftier target thing, right? My vote is 54 games. That translates to roughly 65%, which is a passing grade in college. So extremely arbitrary reasoning. I just think 54 games out of an 82-game season, if you play 65, I think that should be fair. I don't know. But like, again, the spirit of what I'm proposing here, hopefully that you guys see what I mean. And I think that you can also entertain the idea of manipulating that threshold. And so this is where you get into like a cutoff versus a multiplier, right? And important to note here, multipliers don't have to be additive. You can have negative, air quote, multipliers where they're not actually negative. They're just fractions, so they actually hurt the end result. So set playing threshold or the playing multiplier or whatever for games against over 500 teams, or nationally broadcast games or something like that, where, like we've all talked about, the stakes are just different. And there's a lot more, right, on the table, on the line, whatever. And I don't think anybody's going to be really upset if Embiid sits against the Spurs, which, as we all know, he definitely didn't. He instead dropped fucking 70 points on, funny enough. But, I think there needs to be some acknowledgement there. And so as far as setting that multiplier for the over 500 teams, you could just use the previous season's playoff teams as a sample set. All power to the teams that, turn the ship around, right the ship. You're obviously going to have exceptions like Memphis this year with Ja being out and all this other shit. Again, I am not an expert on this. I don't know exactly how the math turns out, but I think we could figure out a way to find a way to figure out which games actually matter more to the league, to the fans, etc. Another idea. We have algorithms that evaluate the strength of schedule. They calculate, how good the fucking teams are you're playing. Why don't we start there? As far as assessing the penalty of missing games, this goes back to my earlier point that, again, I just can't get out of my head. Embiid, sit the fuck out for the Indiana Pacers game 2 days before Denver. I know they're a hot young team and they're doing great. I don't even remember what the fuck standing they're at. They're probably at 4 or 5 now. Denver was the game you needed to be healthy for. There's no fucking reason within a reasonable doubt you didn't already know that, and you could have taken the right steps in order to make sure you were going to fucking go out there and play. And notice one of the byproducts of using this kind of approach here with the strength of schedule, whatever, is you are incentivizing star players to rest against worse, air quote, teams, which just means that the playing fields get even more level. So in theory, the games are actually maybe even more exciting, which might ultimately be good for the league. I don't really know. I don't know. So idea. And so those were all the penalty ideas. So eligibility threshold, I think, should be really low. My vote is 65%. Let's use some dynamic, I'm saying, dynamic commitment devices or dynamic weighting approaches here for if we already have the strength of schedules, we already know who's good and who isn't. Maybe we start with last year's playoff results and work off of there. But maybe we just have a more dynamic approach to how we're actually penalizing guys for missing certain games. For example, Embiid should have been fucking tanked after dipping on that Denver game, right? I'm saying, that is the most important regular season game. I'm sorry, I gotta save all that shit for the next section when I talk about Embiid specifically, but you understand what I'm saying. If it's really that simple, Jesus Christ, play the game. Great. Penalties. So what about incentives? What about rewards? So I know I brought up the idea of the Iron Man Award, which I still think is a worthwhile just thought experiment thing. The qualifiers for that get very murky quickly. I'm sure that's not a groundbreaking one. I'm sure there are reasons why that isn't, in fact, in place. But back to the multiplier idea, you can tell that when we think about performance metrics for executives, you have to think about multipliers constantly. Let's do greater than 1 multipliers now for the incentives. What if we have a multiplier of the games played, something to do with the proportion, whatever the proportion of the games played that you have, get multiplied by the final number of votes you receive. So back to our Illuminati friends of 100 voters. What if we multiply the final number of votes you get by that fraction? So 1 plus whatever. If you played all 82 games, it'd be 1 plus 1. But if you played half, it'd be 1 plus 1/2. It'd be 1.5. 1.5 versus 2. I mean, it's very, very simple, very rudimentary, but Jesus Christ, why can't we fucking reward guys for, coming out? And again, very quickly becomes a matter of, well, I don't know. If Draymond stabs me in the face and now I can't do it, well, that's tough, and I understand. That's why I pointed out the other thing before with the whatever the fuck it's called, the what is it? The bad faith circumstances, right? That was in the agreement of the new rule that the players union agreed to, and all the coaches and owners, blah, 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 blah. So you can have protections in place, and those cutoffs like 62 games if you have a season, whatever. You can still have those in place. But again, these are just like very simple ways to like reward the scale of on-court impact you have in helping your team succeed. So that's just a very simple incentive idea, and that's really the only thing I have right now in that realm. Taking a step back, this is all inside of the dynamic commitment devices here, so I think penalties are going to be received worse, and that's just how things are, so make it harder for penalties to come into play. Guys' seasons, guys' bodies, there's just a million reasons that I think taking a more fluid and dynamic approach to how we're rewarding or penalizing guys, it's very easy to agree with in theory, I know, and once you get into reality, it's very hard to actually implement, just like any public policy or anything else like that. But like I'm saying, just trying to get people to think about this kind of shit. If you play every game, why don't we just introduce some kind of multiplier that just gives some level of extra boost or nod to those guys. Call up LeBron, hire an entire fleet of German doctors, and make it happen, Embiid. All I gotta say. All right, guys. So thanks for hearing out. These are just proposal prototype / wireframe. We have radical transparency and dynamic commitment devices. Would love to hear your thoughts. Again, this is all in the midst of a bonkers week of, being chock full of just freak out reactions. And most of the time you just get, well, how do you feel about the new rule? Oh, I just think it's stupid. Okay. What would you fucking change about it? How about that? So, great. That's what I got so far to be returned to. Great. End of part 3. Next up is the Embiid specific case study. As you can tell, I could talk about that forever. I promise you it is going to be quick, and then we're going to move into trades. All right, coming up. All right, welcome back. Part 4, Embiid specific case study. I've been intertwining him and using him as a microcosm, example, metaphor, simile, all of the things throughout this whole thing. So I'm going to keep this really short, but I just want it to be very direct, efficient, and economic. So two buckets. First one is Tin Man. At this point, I'm doubtful Joel can survive multiple playoff series, let alone 4, and win a title. Sadly, I don't think he minds putting himself in a position to be the martyr of the new 65-game rule. These are all my opinions. He knows he's not durable enough for the postseason, let alone the regular season. He knows, or knew, people would automatically blame the new rule or Denver fans if he pushed himself in that Golden State game and got hurt. And even more so, subconsciously even, he might even know that his best shot at true legacy as a result of those two things is letting it live in mystery and in the land of the hypothetical. If I could just bring in a sample of a mic drop, I would throw it in here. Maybe I will. But that is actually how I feel. We do not, I don't know how a reasonable person takes a look at his track record at this point and actually believes he can make it through an entire postseason as productively as we have seen him be in the regular season. I would also say that a reasonable person at this point would have to at least entertain the idea that he went into that game against Golden State without Maxey, not hoping, but not refuting the risk of severe injury coming. And he knew what narratives would come from that. Fuck the rule. Fuck the Denver fans. This is all everybody else's fault. It's like, fuck the game, not the player. Right? So that's where my issue comes into play. First of all, so that is bucket number one, Tin Man. Bucket number two, accountable who? I know I already got into this, but it's worth repeating. One, Joel is an adult. So right after he ducked the Denver game, you heard a lot of people say what I said last week was he's not obligated to play. Fuck yeah. Okay, great. Like, whatever. Sure. Right. It's like obligation versus opportunity. Like I said, not obligated was a lot of opportunity. You're still fucking disappointing. You're not obligated to play at altitude, and you're not obligated to play any game ever if you're not feeling up to it. But then the idea that the fans are to blame for him not playing or for him getting injured in Golden State is really fucking myopic and stupid. Primarily for the reason that I've already raised. That matchup against Denver he should have had a countdown on his proverbial desk of just X's on the calendar, counting down for that game. No doubt. You should have had that. Fuck the Indiana game. Fuck the game before that if you have to. Because that was indisputably the most important regular season game of your entire season. Right, regular season. Said that twice. Great. So the fact that people want to say, oh my God, the fans pressured him into jeopardizing his livelihood. How about you make sure your fucking well-being and livelihood is ready to roll when it matters? How about that? Right? How about we look backward at how hard and, proactively the greats fucking play, dude? What are we doing? You don't just roll up to pre-warm-ups, and this is putting the whole accountability thing aside with the injury reporting and the fines and whatever. Like, I don't even give a shit about that, but, like, how do we get to the point where you're in warm-ups like, man, no, I guess I just don't have it today. I just don't feel... Fucking have it, bro. What are we talking about? Do you care or not? Do you care about the postseason? Then don't fucking play in Golden State. Do you care about the narrative against Jokic and playing at altitude? Don't play in Indiana. You're an adult. It's pretty simple. Last sub-bullet. Where's Nurse? Like I said, player empowerment, my ass. Honestly, this whole situation has dragged me to the right pretty far, where I have a hard time looking past this is a company, this is an organization, and everyone here has a boss. If Embiid is looking like how he did in the first half against Golden State, it is the coaches, it is Nick Nurse's or the head trainer's responsibility to get him to realize he's being selfish and he's risking the whole team's season. That does not excuse the hate he's getting from the fans, including myself. That doesn't necessarily excuse any of that, doesn't take away from the validity of that, but you gave in and you pushed it. Now, I don't know what the actual injury or final injury is going to be. I think the current reporting is that they're doing more tests to really figure it out. What I do know is that Shams deleted a tweet saying it was a lateral meniscus tear, and he had to delete it because the Sixers were like, it is not technically a tear, which, good, great. I think it would have been better for Embiid's narrative if it was a tear, but I'm glad we're getting that squared away. But at a certain point, you have to think about the boss thing. Daryl Morey watching that, I just can't get it out of my head. How long and how much just travesty has the Sixers franchise been through since Embiid has been there? And you can see underneath all of this, the porcupines and the tough outer skin and all, how much shit I'm giving Embiid. Underneath all of that, man, I feel for the guy, dude. Multiple first-round picks that sucked. Ben Simmons fiasco. The guy obviously is, not the most advantaged when it just comes to the way his body's built. And I think that's why I kind of just go back to the Nick Nurse and how on earth are you letting that happen? My job, if I'm Daryl, my job is to make sure the team is succeeding, and that could not be farther or further from that end. If I was Daryl Morey, it would be a smackdown for Nick Nurse and whoever the fuck the head trainer is. Your job is to get your best players to buy in to a team-first mindset, and if you already are not durable, you do not get to go back in for the second half. I am sorry. That is selfish, and it is stupid. And fans are going to be fans, and I'm not just saying that because obviously I'm in that group too, but at a certain point, you're making hundreds of millions of dollars, and if you can't handle it, you're going to end up like Kevin Durant or worse, wherever the fuck you're headed right now, buddy. That was dumb. And yeah, even if you would have wiped the Denver home court with Jokic's face, dropped 60, 70 points again, it's not even like I'm just dick ride Jokic. I would have been fucking stoked for you, dude. It's just sad. And sorry, I know that was the last sub point, but again, with this just narrative thing of, the martyr, I know it's harsh to say, I think he's okay with being the martyr of this whole thing and, living in the land of the hypothetical, whatever. That's obviously, the worst way to kind of look at all this. It's not very nice. It's not coming from the best place. But listen, man. At a certain point, you just kind of got to double down on what matters most. The MVP, you did it. The Supermax eligibility by getting MVP, you did it. You're not going to win that much more money. The only thing that really matters now is the postseason success. Mind you, I'm still only talking about you as an individual at that point. When you think about the postseason success as well, that becomes a more team-oriented mindset. And ultimately, this is a team sport. So, you wanted to help yourself, don't play in Indiana. You wanted to help the team, definitely don't play in Golden State. And definitely don't play in that second half. All right? I understand the narrative hunting and the fact that you get clowned on all the time. All right. But you're an adult, and you're also an employee. So Nick Nurse and whoever else on the training team, you should just be happy that I am not Daryl Morey, is what I'll say to that. If it's a business, you protect your assets. And that was appalling. All right. End of part 4, Embiid specific case study. Next up, we're going to talk about some trades. Stay tuned. All right. Welcome back. Last part, part 5. So I'm looking at the timestamp here in Ableton, and it is way too long. And I personally don't really fuck with when podcasters make me sit through super long episodes, and it ends up being a thing where they talk less vertically and just try to cover more things at a surface level, which is kind of the antithesis of why I started this thing. So I'm just going to stick with one team only for the whole trade thing. I know that's not great. I'll see what I can do over the weekend. But I got to do it just because I live in Southern California and they just can't stop being a engine pumping out drama. The name of the segment is The Lakers Need LASIK. God, this is too fun. I got to be honest, guys. I don't know. I don't know what to say for myself. Okay. I want to start off with just something that literally happened while I was in the bathroom in between takes there. And that is that. So this past week, I don't even remember what day it was, but the Lakers lost a brutal game to the just elevator collapsing down the elevator shaft, just free falling Atlanta Hawks. Virtually, I think there was a report, last week or something, somebody said that literally every person on that roster that isn't named Trae Young and Jalen Johnson, who, side note, if you don't know who Jalen Johnson is, look him up. He's an absolute stud, absolute freak. He is almost the entire reason I watch Atlanta games. So the report came out, everyone's on the table except for him and Trae. Lakers got smacked, and then I guess technically the morning after at like 2:30 a.m., LeBron goes out and tweets the hourglass emoji, which obviously is cryptic because, well, the why is because LeBron's a fucking drama queen and needs a minimum whatever threshold of attention at all times and whatever. I mean, a part of me I guess just to talk about it off the top, like a part of me is just kind of down with it. I think if you're in, pretty much a neck and neck race of the best player to ever play an entire fucking sport, and you're doing it at this age, at this level, like there's just gonna be a day where he's gonna be gone, and honestly, we're just gonna joke about this, and I'm gonna kind of cry inside a little. So, yeah, while drama and whatever, it's just I don't know. I don't hate it as much as most people do, I guess. But yeah, it's the hourglass emoji, the specific one that is almost up, and obviously the million ways to interpret that. My time in the league is almost up. Darvin Ham's time on Earth is almost up. My teammates' time on this roster is almost up. Yada yada yada. So intentionally cryptic as fuck. Oh, and also LeBron isn't available for media for the 3 days following that. And then you fast forward to yesterday, or I'm sorry, the hourglass was 2 days ago. Okay. And then, so yesterday, a day after that, the Lakers played the Celtics, and Bron and AD both sit. A lot of you probably have already heard this, but the team not only beat the Celtics. I don't think the Celtics had any of their starters even missing games either. It's not like they responded by sitting there no. Like they actually lost to the Lakers without LeBron and AD. And what makes it even worse is it wasn't even close. The closest the Celtics got to the Lakers in that game was somewhere like 8 or 9 points, obviously, besides the start or whatever. But like, it wasn't even a close game. And you just have Bron sitting there at the end of the bench and whatever. And these guys who are, mind you, outspokenly on the trading block and just tossed around like chess pieces and, fucking not really human beings. Played with the most heart I think I might have ever have seen a LeBron James team ever play with in my entire life. Like, straight up, you had dudes making like $2 million this year, just like clawing and like, I'm looking at the Jackson Hayes of the world. Like, they're playing. Back to my joke about Embiid hustling so hard for MVP. Like, these dudes are playing like their families are held hostage right now, and they need to make it work. So, I guess that is what's going to happen when you're on a LeBron team, and if he's not happy, he does have the pull to mess with the interior decorating, if you will. So anyway, that was weird. Oh yeah, and then at the end of the game, like, there was still like 10 seconds left or whatever, and like, again, it was a blowout. So whatever. It's not like whatever, but then Bron straight up just gets off the bench and like leaves and goes back to the locker room early. And it was very, very standoffish. Wasn't a great look. Obviously, he wasn't even in the game, and they beat the best team by point differential, overall dominance, whatever, in the entire league without him in the game, which I'm sure made him feel awesome. So he just fucked off. So he's been a bit of a drama queen. Way it goes. There's not much more to really say about it. But did want to say the reason I brought this up, and back to me just like whatever, peeing in the bathroom here. Oh, man, he has another one actually. Okay. No, that's about Trae Young getting snubbed. Anyway, so this is 4 hours ago. Or no, I'm sorry. This is an hour ago. So one of the writers for his show / podcast, The Shop, if you haven't heard about it, is his own thing, whatever. That dude just tweeted out an apple, just the fruit. And then, that was 4 hours ago. And then an hour ago, Bron replies to that tweet with a Statue of Liberty emoji and then a crown emoji. Funny to see that from King James. Obviously, the Knicks are just all over the news right now and whatever. But, they're really looking up. They're doing super well. Whatever. Also worth noting that the Lakers are playing the Knicks tomorrow at 5:30. But, I guess I'm just trying to get out ahead of that. Sorry, I know this flow is just really fucked now because I'm just doing some live reporting for the first time. So there we are. So you're just getting my live reaction here. They're playing the Knicks tomorrow. The Knicks are just like the darlings of the league at this point because Jalen Brunson is balling the fuck out, and he just has so many ties to New York and the whole like leaving Dallas for nothing. Mark Cuban really shit his bed on that, and then he's just balling out, and the city's really just embraced him. And not to mention, for a franchise that gets tossed around a lot as being such an enormous market and such a big kind of cultural player and historical player in the league, the Knicks have been ass like most of our entire lives. I think their last like real run at relevance was like the early 90s. And it's just been a long thread of pretty sustained incompetence. So I just say that to say that's the backdrop Jalen Brunson walked into. And like now they just got a lot of juice. Absolute home run by getting OG Anunoby. That is the best fitting. That's got to be the best trade of the entire season so far. I can't imagine. I'm trying to think on the fly here, but Anyway. So LeBron's just tweeting about that, and then he's putting in the crown emoji, so people are just going to eat that shit up and freak out about it. And again, people want to just say that LeBron wants to get traded. I think there were reports that came out earlier today as well that, like, basically is from Rich Paul. So if you don't know Rich Paul, he's LeBron's agent, and he runs the biggest, like, player agency in the league. But they hate the Knicks for some reason. I actually want to do a deep dive into that. I don't even know why, but I know that that's a thing, and that's a big reason why people are like, LeBron could never play in the Knicks because they fucking hate his... And Rich Paul and LeBron are like, whatever, like best friends for life, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, cool. So don't think LeBron is going to the Knicks. He just, replied with that. So now you know. There really is no deeper analysis here. But LeBron's agent said he's not asking for a trade out of LA. So who the fuck cares? So Lakers need LASIK. Like, insane ratio of volume of media attention and discussion to volume of thorough, sophisticated analysis and assessment of actual root causing of what their problems are and like how things are really going to translate to the playoffs. It's a lot of just like running with narratives and reinforcing what we hear. Let's just get this out of the way off the top. My own personal assessment. I know I'm coming off my high horse here, like I know everything, but my personal assessment, let's start with DeJounte Murray. I think he's overrated. I know it's hard to control for Trae Young and some of the other pieces on Atlanta. It kind of does feel like he's squeezed up and hunching his shoulders a little bit, just being on that roster and trying to find himself on it. So, I want to acknowledge that, but based on the gameplay that I've seen him put up, first of all, I know they say a lot about his defense. When he came into the league, he was known as a, world-class defender. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. That has fallen off quite a bit as soon as he got his All-Star, which, does happen more than people want to admit. People get paid, people make All-Star teams, and then they just want to play offense and not worry about defense. I think that the idea that he can't get back to that level at his age is a little unreasonable, especially if you're on a contender team, which is the other thing that I feel like people miss is this, like, the potential for ceiling raising with certain players in different environments. I think Zach LaVine comes to mind, for example. Julius Randle as well. Like, if you put these guys on, like, whatever, some, like, real alpha fucking type shit contending teams, all I got to say is you might be fucking surprised what guys can shut up and actually do. When they're kind of let loose in their own fucking worlds, like, yeah, they're going to, like, fucking nuke each other and shit all over themselves. But, okay. I think DeJounte Murray's a little overrated. I don't really love his game. He takes a lot of tough shots that I just don't like the way they look. And I also don't think, as far as the playmaking stuff is concerned, I don't think he's that good. I really, really don't. And I hate to say it. And again, I say that acknowledging. I don't know what it might look like when if he can spread his wings and whatever and like not basically have a snubbed all-star in Trae Young up his ass. So that is that. But this is where I want to take it specifically. So the best air quote death lineup for the Lakers as is right now. And I want to break this down into a framework, and I've seen this in crunch time in some of their biggest games, specifically that Golden State game that we saw last week. That was, aside from the in-season tournament, I think the peak of their entire season. This is who they played down the stretch, and I'm going to insert some of the other players. Some of them have been hurt or whatever, but we just want to mention the guys on the roster who could slot into these roles, but then keep it within the framework of how they're trying to utilize them. So their best air quote death lineup for the playoffs or end of game situations, whatever. So we're going to have LeBron initiating offense. That is the way it's going to be. He has the highest IQ, maybe of anybody in the stadiums that he's playing inside of, okay? So that's just is what it is. He's seen every single coverage. Granted, he's older. I still think it's a disservice to not have the ball in his hands, whether it's late game or not. He needs to initiate. And then you have your point guards. So D'Angelo Russell and Gabe Vincent. Gabe is supposed to be evaluated, if I'm not mistaken, at the end of February. It is now February, and I just like to bring that up because nobody ever mentions him at all. But people also love to mention how the guys on Miami last year who made it to the finals really stepped up, and Vincent was a huge part of that. Granted, he has been so injury-ridden this season that it's hard to project exactly how helpful he'll be. But showed not only he can play, but he can play well in the playoffs, okay? So great shooter, undersized on defense, right? That, of course, is going to be what it is. But I'm talking hit-ahead passes. I'm talking spot-ups. I'm talking, movement shooters. And hopefully, coming out of the injury, you can get back to that spot. I'm assuming, perfect recovery, whatever. But most of the game, I want, these guys initiating hit-ahead passes and spot-ups, okay? Make your fucking shots, please, for the love of God, or hit Vanderbilt or hit whoever the fuck else is really long and fast. Go, run, initiate, and make shots. Crunch time, you are going to secondarily play make if LeBron drives and kicks and you have enough time to make a secondary play and whatever, you're going to get to do that. Otherwise, you're going to shut the fuck up and you're going to spot up and you're going to make clutch shots and Bron is going to get you the fucking ball and you're not going to miss. That's what you're going to do. Again, death lineup. Bron initiate and then D'Lo/Vincent, spot up, secondary play make. We'll see how Vincent actually looks. Maybe we won't, actually. Maybe he'll get traded. But, okay. So, point guard. Bron is, I guess, small forward, but, functionally point guard. But, okay, small forward, whatever you're. 3, and then 1. And so your 2, your shooting guard, obviously that's going to be Austin Reeves, none other than breakout postseason last year, primarily because I think he's just the perfect kid to have in the Lakers just aura and solar system of just magnetically attracting foul calls. It's pretty disgusting. And, to borrow a term from First Things First from the late great Nick Wright, is take integrity. So I know I bitch a lot about how much fun it is to watch Embiid shoot free throws. It's a lot of fun to watch Austin Reeves shoot free throws. I think he just looks a lot more hilarious getting these calls and how hard he has to try. And then you kind of see the exact same antics being done by Embiid, and it just looks 20 times as hilarious because Embiid is maybe 3 times the size of Austin Reeves. So most of the game, Reeves is going to be your spot up guy as well. Secondary playmaking, again, you kick it out, he can make that secondary read. And then his superpower, which really elevates him, in my opinion, is his ability to draw fouls, which supremely overlooked as an admirable attribute to have, particularly in the postseason. You want to break up, a momentum swing or a run by your opponent, whatever. I mean, in my own person, you can't underestimate how fucking important it is to be able to get yourself in a position to engage the referees. It's unfortunate, but it is the way the game is played. My mind goes to the guys like the De'Aaron Foxes. I want to say Jason Tatum, but he unfortunately isn't as good as I would want to give him credit for. You got just guys like that, Embiid's, the Hardens, whatever. You're obviously putting pressure on the defenses as well because they know that how the fuck to do this shit, and then all of a sudden you're gonna foul out and now you're pissed off and it's just not a good time. There are just layers to how useful it is to be good at those things. So that's most of the game for Reeves. And then in crunch time, same exact shit as D'Lo and Vincent. You're gonna space the floor, you're gonna spot up, you're not gonna miss, and you're gonna make that secondary play. Awesome. 4. As is right now, you have Rui, Prince, and Vando. Most of the game, you're going to be spotting up, you're going to get rebounds, and you're going to defend your fucking ass off. You're not going to get that many shots, but you're in there to defend and make sure that we are rebounding and make sure that you're pulling your defender out of the paint so that Bron can get to the cup, so that Reeves can get to the cup, and so that our second all-star, Anthony Davis, at the 5, can get to the cup. Crunch time, still with the 4, you're going to be spotting up and spacing, you're going to be getting rebounds, and what do you know? You're going to be defending your fucking ass off, or you're not going to get in the game. There it is. 5, center, Anthony Davis, co-all-star with LeBron. Most of the game, you're going to be finishing because you're one of the best vertical lob threats and finishers the game has literally ever seen. You're going to get us offensive rebounds, and you're going to get touches and post-ups because, again, you are a very, very dexterous offensive player. You're going to get touches around the basket. I don't really like him necessarily spacing, but what I do like about AD is that he's not so bad that you can completely help off him. And we have seen, at least in the bubble, so it has been a while now, I still believe he can get hot from there. And so I'm sure it's one of the things if you're playing against the Lakers in the playoffs and he gets out there, it's like, you know, we're going to hold off until you prove us otherwise, prove that we should be guarding you that closely. So that is what it is. But then in crunch time is really where it counts, right? You're going to be roaming in the dunker spot just like a center. You're going to just feast on offensive rebounds, and you're going to finish. And you're going to make that two-man game with LeBron unstoppable again. Because, again, your threat at the rim to finish is virtually the biggest one in the entire league. I know Gobert gets a lot of credit. Whatever. Gobert can't catch a fucking beach ball, dude. His hands are so shot. AD is honestly a freak. If you watch the way this dude, how athletic this dude is with the way he can catch a ball and just get it automatically up, like it's really, really impressive. It obviously not as fast, but it kind of reminds me of why Zion, I think, is very good, is just like the just level of coordination and just energy, like just like change of pace to be able to just finish everything, like go right back. It's just great. So end of game specifically, right? Brown initiating, D'Angelo Russell, Gabe Vincent, whichever one, spacing outside, Reeves spacing outside. Both of those positions going to secondarily play make and spot up. You have AD roaming down in the dunker spot, getting offensive rebounds, being that threat near the cup. And then the 4 position with Vanderbilt, Rui, and Prince is where I really want to look at. So if you think about that framework, specifically offensively, and we'll get to the defense, but specifically offensively, in my opinion, that 4 position is their weakness. I think with better spacing for that 4 position, if you can get those guys to be hitting shots and pull the defense away from the basket and get that two-man game between Brown and AD going where they just literally have space, I think that's the best. That's your best shot right there. And where did this come from? This came, again, from that Golden State game last week. There were end of the 4th quarter in regulation, end of the first overtime, and then end of the second overtime. Those are 3 periods in the clutch where what happened? LeBron was driving to the basket on the last possession of all 3 of those periods. And you know what happened all 3 times? Vanderbilt was in the game. He ended up playing, I think, like 41 minutes or something. It was a plus 30. He did a great job. But all 3 of those last second drives by Brown were just enhanced and swallowed up from the opposing team's perspective, like 300%, because Vanderbilt can't space the floor. It's his own separate conversation. I would just literally have a gun to these guys' heads and tell you to take 1,000 fucking threes a day, every single song. I know, I'm sure if it was that simple, everybody would do it. It just blows my mind, but it doesn't matter. The lane is too clogged, and I think they tried to space out intentionally. They had Anthony Davis and Vanderbilt. I think I recapped it before. Maybe I didn't, but they tried to space it out, and it made no fucking sense. I think it was Clay and Andrew Wiggins on like every single one of those plays were like, fuck that. He's not going to pass it to Vanderbilt or Anthony Davis outside. he's obviously going to take the last shot, and then he just gets kind of swallowed up. Obviously, the shot is just tougher. It's not like he got blocked, but that's my point. That was my takeaway. I'm like, we can have Anthony Davis, again, swallowing up the offensive boards, but we cannot afford to have our our power forward, also down there fucking the shit up. It makes no fucking sense. Granted, if it was an inbound play on some of those, so you can probably just afford to sub in Rui for Vando, but whatever. That is why I think in the clutch that is really important. So obviously that begs the question, why, at least in the Golden State game, did they decide to go with Vando in the clutch and not Rui or Prince? Obviously Rui and Prince can both shoot from the outside. It's the defense, obviously. I think I said this before, and this is deeper. It's not even I guess it is philosophical, but I think it's a lot harder to grow into a high-level defender than it is to a high-level offensive player. I think at a certain point, defense is kind of innate. I really do believe that. And based on the minutes that Rui and Prince have gotten, particularly late in games, it is very clear that Darvin Ham does not trust them on the defensive end, nor should he. Prince is absolutely useless in the game if he is not hitting threes. He is essentially the equivalent of Jordan Clarkson or Cam Thomas, basically, at a power forward position, which is not good. So if he's having a bad offensive night, I've heard it on podcasts before about him. It's like, it's widely known he does not rebound ever. He is just going to run around and try to make shots. Can't afford to do that if you're on a LeBron James team. Rui, on the other hand, is a little bit different. I'm actually trying to fucking remember how much I talked about this. Oh, I think I did talk about that last time. Okay, I don't want to unpack that again with the shooting percentages, but it's clear he doesn't have that trust in Darvin Ham as well. I apologize, guys. So what did they end up doing? They went with Vando. They went with defense. The Lakers and the whole narrative about it, and I don't disagree with it, is their late game offense, much like the Minnesota Timberwolves, is butthole. It is very, very hard. It is very, very hard to put that much pressure on LeBron late in games to just manufacture those shots that he was taking and convert on the shots that he was taking late in that Golden State game. Jesus fucking Christ, Vanderbilt, be better. Even McDaniels on the Timberwolves can fucking hit shot. Like, dude, it makes me sad. It's more of a disappointment thing. I just can't fucking believe this dude has zero offensive, like, just, especially too, and I'm sorry, I don't mean for this to be a roast on Vando, but like, the things where he's 6'9", right? Just like McDaniel, I put him and McDaniel so close together in my brain. Their games are just very similar, but again, different in important ways. But just the fact that Vando cannot ever seem to finish through contact as well. Like, at least be able to do that. If you won't shoot the ball, at least be able to finish through contact and like get yourself, help yourself at the line or draw contact at least. It honestly just, it floors me a bit that this man is that useless on offense. Granted, world-class defender, and, the camera would pan to your Draymond Greens of the world. I'm sorry that you don't have two of the greatest shooters to ever play the game on your team. It would obviously be a lot different. But you're not. So Jesus fucking Christ, at least finish your contact and get yourself to the free throw line. Fucking even Austin Reeves can do it, dude. Jesus. All right. So a lot of teasing there, but ultimately what I'm trying to say is I think there's a lot of buzz for the Lakers to fix their point guard, to go out and get a point guard, a playmaker, blah, 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 blah. When it comes to the playoffs, I actually think LeBron / Reeves / whatever, I think it's going to be good enough. Actually, before I double click on this, I had a really interesting take. I forget where it was, but I think this is a really helpful way to think about the Lakers roster as is right now is it really does feel like they're a playoff team and they're not a regular season team, which sounds really bizarre, right? I feel like that's just not a thing that anybody ever thinks about. But I really do think that that is the case, which is why I am quite hesitant and I hear all these overreactions and craziness about the Lakers and how doomed they are. I truly, think about those late game things or whatever, where you have, okay, yeah, sure, you're clogging the lane with Vando and whatever, not great, and Bron has to do. It is an absolute pain in the ass to beat these guys. I'm going to tell you right now, to beat the roster as is, it is going to be a pain in the ass to get past the Lakers defense in the playoffs, as is right now. So that being said, a lot of the focus and narratives centering on their point guards and their playmaking and whatever, I'm not so sure that that is what they should be looking at, because again, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm too worried. I'm as worried as a lot of other people are about their playmaking and sort of the playmaking juice for them. Again, for the regular season, no doubt, no fucking doubt. Jesus Christ. Okay, yeah, run that shit up. But I'm specifically talking about when it counts in playoffs. In addition to that, I'm not sure about we need a top 25 player in the league thing with the Murrays and the blah, blah, blah. Because, again, the more I watch them, the more I think about that 4 spot. And unless you're Lauri Markkanen, who is unattainable, I don't know how many, insanely great guys you kind of have, that are going to cost, Austin Reeves or whatever, just gut out all your bench guys. So I don't know about the top 25 player, and I don't know about a point guard, man. And here's the analysis. So Vando, Rui, and Prince, they can all have horrible offensive nights on the same night, which in the regular season, again, the Lakers just can't afford. They need that help from that position offensively, and then against the best teams, they need Vanderbilt's defense to shut down the players. Post regular season and postseason. So, but again, that trade-off on the offensive end is just astronomical. So then you take Vando out, you put Rui in, you're sacrificing the defense, but then you keep Vando in, you're sacrificing the spacing like you saw in every last-second drive by Bron. So, whatever. I'm doing a lot of, positing here. So here are some quick ideas, and I don't really fully understand / didn't have the time to double-click and research fully the whole trade clauses and the salary matching and put it in the trade machine and blah, 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 blah. Similar to the proposal with the rule changes for the award stuff, these are mostly just ideas, so take with them what you will. And it's pretty short. So I want to start here. As far as the point guard thing goes, I guess another sub reason why I'm not super sure if that's where they need to look. Get Kyle Lowry. I know that's probably funny to a lot of people, and he was absolute ass on the Heat this season, unfortunately, particularly on the offensive end, which of course raises its own fucking issues here. Call me crazy. Lowry's just defensive tenacity is so undervalued and underappreciated. And again, I know everybody wants to just hammer offense. Lakers offense is their problem. Okay, I get it. Again, in the post, I genuinely think it is a different conversation. And then you think about those matchups against, oh my God forbid a Golden State matchup, a Jamal Murray matchup on Denver. I don't hate the idea of having Kyle Lowry defending Jamal Murray over D'Angelo Russell. I don't hate that at all. I'm going to tell you that right the fuck now. I think that the Lakers should have signed Lowry already. Vetman, whatever. I know he went to Charlotte. I actually should follow up on that and see if they, bought out his contract. But I just think that that's a perfect fit. He's also a vet. He doesn't fucking complain. I actually like it a lot. Makes it when he plays, high IQ player. I think him and LeBron would be honestly a great pairing. And he's older too, so I mean, even if you just pick your spots, you give him the vet min, whatever the fuck. Great. So back to the power forward position. Here are some names. Grant Williams. Lot of energy. Very animated, likes to talk, got clowned by Jimmy Butler last year on the Celtics, yada, yada. Hasn't had a great season with Dallas, and his minutes have been pretty shaky, and I was kind of sad to see that. I'd been thinking quite a bit about Grant and his fit when it was clear he was going to, pull a Bruce Brown and go chase the money, which obviously you should do. Ended up on Dallas, and I actually really fucking liked it. I mean, him in that kind of like, I guess you could do smaller with Kleba, but obviously Dallas got Derek Lively, who's fucking great. So now you can throw in, Kleba at that 4 position and whatever, and he's a pretty solid defender, really. But I guess just because Lively has been so good and Kleba is just clearly a better system player and Dallas is... I just think Grant Williams could really, really be available. And he has a spark, which I like. It's always a risk, no doubt, especially with LeBron and whatever. But I just love that shit, man. I just think about, again, that Boston blowout last night, and, you got these guys just hustling, and if there's something about Grant Williams you're never going to ever doubt, it's that the dude fucking cares, and that, that's why Russ is fitting in so well in the Clippers and there is just a level of value that comes with guys that just bring that juice, and his outside shooting hasn't been amazing this season, but it was pretty decent in Boston last year. I don't think he costs that much. Again, I'd have to look at the trade machine shit, but I just kind of fuck with that. I'm not going to lie. I don't even know how much he'd have to give up, too, based on his current value in the market. All right, guy number 2, Kelly Olynyk. Utah is fucking very weird. I never have any idea what they're doing. I just thought of this right now while I'm introing this. Is Utah the Brooklyn of the Western Conference, where nobody actually knows what the fuck they're doing, and they also happen to have like a million useful assets that like any contender wants? Looking at you, Jordan Clarkson, or even Colin Sexton, I'm sorry. Like, I would not be opposed at all, honestly, on some of these dudes. But, I mean, Kelly Olynyk is he's the fucking ideal guy. I know he's a bit controversial and whatever. But, like, you just talk about a secondary playmaker at the power forward, as well as a dude who can shoot from the outside and stretch the floor. Dude, that would not be bad at all. Defensively, he's not a fucking world beater, but I think this is one of those things where you want to have utility pieces for different use cases. Like, literally think about it in 2 different side-out plays at the end of a playoff game, a game 6 or 7, let's just say. You have a timeout remaining and whatever, you're playing another team and you got to defend for possession, and regardless of how it goes, you're going to call timeout, whatever. You're going to put in Vanderbilt for that possession, and then you're going to put it on offense, and you're going to sub him out for Kelly. You know what I mean? Like that, those kind of utility mix and matching. I mean, that's idealistic. I don't know what Utah really wants, and I don't think they have to do anything. So I don't feel great about that pick. The third one is Jeremy Grant, which I know Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer has been pretty vocal about. Everybody's sleeping on it. I think similar with Olynyk in Utah, like Portland is just not under any pressure to give up Jeremy Grant. Jeremy's also having a phenomenal year, frankly. Not phenomenal like he's, in the MVP race, but like just seems like such a great steady presence for for that really, really young Portland team. And his just kind of even keel, not too high, not too low mindset or whatever, I actually think is a really, really great presence to have around Scoot specifically, who's had some confidence issues starting off his young career here in the league. So that's kind of an outside thing. I think of all these guys, he's going to bring, the biggest price tag too. So I think if you are going to roll with that, we need a top 25 or whatever, 30 play, whatever the fuck you want to call Jeremy Grant. That would be the guy, right? Stretch four, Swiss Army knife, turn to him, whatever. Like, he can self-create, generate, whatever. Obviously, he's one of those guys that would just be super fucking helpful anywhere. He's not quite OG Anunoby, but it's not that far. He's definitely got more self-creation game and turnaround. Honestly, dude, he's hitting some really, really tough shots. That dude is really, really good, man. I'm trying to remember what game it was. Dude, it was the other night when Dame had his return to Portland or whatever, and they ended up fucking beating the Bucks. Side note, Jesus Christ, Milwaukee. Holy shit. Dude, Jeremy Grant is hitting turnaround, fucking 14, 15 foot, turnaround jumpers off balance, almost falling in the. I was like, holy shit. Coming clean here. I don't watch every Portland game, and I just come back in mostly because I want to root on Scoot, and I think they're super athletic as a team, and Shannon Sharp is fire and whatever, or Shaden, fuck. And then you go to the late game stuff, and they just put it in Grant's hands, and honestly, dude, way more often than not, he's, making these tough-ass shots, so I guess this just quickly became a Jeremy Grant ad, but that dude can fucking play, and I think that unfortunately puts him in the unreachable, unattainable camp, but that's at least the mold we're looking for. Okay, last under the radar pick that I have heard absolutely nobody bring up, and I don't even know how confident I am in the fit, is a guy named Vezenkov on Sacramento. This is bonkers, and I'm not going to present it in a way that makes it seem like it's an easy no-brainer sell or whatever. The dude is 6'9". He is the final form Pokemon, final evolution of Klay Thompson, I think. At least on if you look at it from the upside view, where, 6'9", he's huge. He was EuroLeague MVP last year. It was, made some waves that he was signed with the Sacramento Kings. The EuroLeague MVP guys, they always have a super, super mixed bag when they come over to the league. It's a very different game. And I just frankly get the feeling that the Euro guys, if they don't come over here when they're 16 or whatever and go to college here, the Franz Wagner and Mo whatever went to if they don't take that route and they come over here later on in life, I guess they just don't fuck with it. But just watching some of the way this guy kind of plays, man, I watched this insanely awesome breakdown video. I can't remember who it was by, but his EuroLeague MVP whatever season, it was something he scored 10 or 12 points per dribble. The dude just keeps fucking running and just catch, turn, fire. That's why I bring up the Klay Thompson comp is it's insane how little this dude gives a fuck about how close his defender is or whatever it is. The dude does not dribble. He will flash and sprint to the basket and finish a pass, whatever. He will catch and shoot. And that is it. And honestly, based on everything else I've said so far, I don't think that's a bad thing. Similar to the Vando utility piece with the Kelly Olynyk, I don't know. It's a little, idealistic and probably, rosy, if you will. But I just like that mold, man. The dude is, you watch him, I think he's only averaging like 12-ish minutes a game for Sacramento. Dude's flying all over the court. He's a huge-ass body. Again, just shoot fucking shots. When we're talking about the playoffs, get the fuck out of Brown's way and do not miss and defend. You will have a Dellavedova heart attack before you give up on a fucking defensive play. I think Vezenkov might actually be up to that task, frankly. But smaller sample size, the guy doesn't play that much, so is what it is. I just like the archetype. Clearly, you can see what I'm getting at. Obviously, if there was any call at all, it'd be Keegan Murray on Sacramento or anybody from Sacramento, right? Keegan is the perfect mold entirely. So there is that. Grant Williams, Kelly Olynyk, Vezenkov, Jeremy Grant. That's kind of how I feel, at least for the Lakers. But taking another step back, I really, really do feel for the postseason that power forward, that 4 position for the Lakers should be where they look. All right, guys. That is it from me. Thank you all so much for sticking around. I'm so sorry this one was super long. Way too much going on in the league. It is such an exciting time, but means the world, you guys sticking around. Let me know what you think of my thoughts, my analysis, my takes. Always love to hear and grow and evolve. So you can follow and support ThinkShank on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkShank. You can email us at thethinkshank@gmail.com. Once again, my name is Skyler, and you can find me on Twitter at ReinhardtSkyler and on Instagram at SkylerSamReinhardt. So thanks again for tuning in, and until next time.